I'm Sue Weddle, and this is Ubu, spelled U-B-U. She's about 6 and a half. She's not currently in the training program. She was in the training program. She was also in our breeding program. She was released several years ago, and then I've kept her as sort of an ambassador dog, a demonstration dog. She remembers all of her cues and does very well sort of demonstrating what we do. This is Sheila Abramson Miles. She's actually the president of our board of directors. This is OC. Sheila and I have both done many dogs for the program. And I'll just tell you a little bit about sort of how the program works and what we do and how we train them, sort of some of the specifics of the types of dogs we place and the types of clients that we work with, and maybe do a little demonstration with these guys. We are a nonprofit. We train service dogs for people with disabilities, mobility limitations. We place dogs sometimes with children or adults on the autism spectrum, developmental disabilities. We're currently in the process of working with a couple of clients who are in wheelchairs. OC has been matched with one of those clients. And we also place facility dogs that work. Most of our facility dogs right now work in healthcare settings. We've got a dozen dogs in the Northern Healthcare System. We've got 2 at the University of Louisville, Peace Hospital, and we have we are currently in the process, almost finished, placing a dog with a school counselor of an elementary school who works with a lot of special needs children. She likes to greet the new people. And so we start our puppies out very young, at 8 or 9 weeks old, and we start training them just sort of basic manners, basic what we used to call obedience things, just position, sit down, get in heel position, teaching them things like not jumping on people, paying attention to the person holding the leash. Walking nicely on the leash is a big one. It's not as easy as it looks. That's probably about the hardest thing we teach. All those special advanced skills look a lot more complicated, but those are actually quite easy compared to getting a dog to focus while on leash and not sniff and pull and lunge and, interact with the world, the big world around them. Our training program is based on our correctional facility program at the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women in Pewee Valley, state prison for women. We've been there 20 years this year. We started it in 2004. In that program, our inmate trainers are responsible for the lion's share of training of our dogs. Typically, the dogs are there during the weekdays, and then volunteers such as Sheila, myself, and many others get the dogs out, again, typically on the weekend, although it can vary based on the volunteer schedule. Get them out for a couple days a week to socialize the dogs and get them exposed to things they can't get in the prison, things like children, traffic, riding in cars, riding in elevators, crowds, going to restaurants and staying, in position while food is all around them, going to grocery stores, riding on public transportation, being on busy streets with cars going by and things like that. I'm retired now. When I was working, I worked in an office, and I took my dogs to work with me, so they got used to an office setting. And so, and a lot of our volunteers are able to take their dogs to work. We have a volunteer who is a school counselor, so when the dogs are young, she doesn't take them very long, but now that she's got dogs who are a little older, she'll take them at least for a full day or two, and just work in her office with her. We've got some who work in a hospital setting. The dogs get exposed to that while they're working. Ubu, you're not being a very good demonstration of a service dog. Ubu, heel. Down. Thank you. But the inmates really do the training. The dogs are with them 24/7. In our unit, each of our inmate handlers has an individual room. It's a small, sort of 6x10 room. They have a kennel for the dog, and the dogs go with them pretty much everywhere they go within the institution. They go to the dining hall. They go to the recreation center. They go, if they take college classes, they go to classes with them. They go to the chapel. They go to the canteen where they can purchase things. They They can go to routine medical, appointments that they have within the institution. They can't go to procedures, and they cannot go to visiting, and that's really just a safety thing, when families come to visit. Does anybody mind if I just let Boo Boo wander?
No, sure.
But notice how she's paying attention to Sue.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's yeah.
She wanders
Really?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
You're welcome to. And the reason I did that is, you know, I kept putting her back in position and she kept breaking it. And rather than, you know, sort of allowing that, I'm just gonna release her and not, you know, try to get her. She's in a new environment. Although we do a lot of presentations, she isn't regularly trained like OC is right now because she's been out of that mode for a while. So Ubu's a little rusty, let's put it that way. But when it comes to doing going through her paces, she's pretty good, and she'll do anything for a cookie, so she'll see later on. And so the inmates work from the time they're little puppies. They work with them on all the basics, and then as they get older and they start working on advanced skills and incorporating some of the things that will later be, you know, very advanced tasks and things that they'll need. One of the probably the most common thing that our clients with mobility limitations need is a dog who will pick up things for them or bring them things that they can't reach or they can't bend over to get, or it's the phone in the home or things like that. So the dog's retrieving is a big part of what we teach the dogs as they get older. Even picking up their own leashes can be a big help if you drop the leash, which I have been known to do. You've got, especially if your hands are full. So we have the dogs doing a lot of, you know, tasks like that. And some things that don't seem that important are really very important for all of our dogs, even the dogs that are in facilities in the hospital. Just getting in a position, you want them out of the way. You want a dog that will get over here and stay over here. And oops, if a cart's coming along here, now I want her over here. And so we want the dogs to just very easily and quickly, you know, just move around and get in the position that we need them to get in, like the park here. It doesn't work with all chairs. Some of them have rungs and things like that. But if we have a chair like these, which are nice, and the dogs just get out of the way, they're not in the aisle. And so the inmates teach them all of these things. Anything I show you that Ubu does or that we show you that OC does, we didn't teach them that. they learned it from the
Well, and they groom them also, so we don't have to bathe them. I mean, they clip their nails and groom them and brush their teeth daily. They learn far more than just the mechanics of training in our program at KCIW, which stands for Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women. They learn grooming, as Sheila said. They learn the training, of course. They learn a lot about canine learning theory and motivation, the whole science of husbandry, which is really, in our case, the handling of the dogs. You know, we want the dogs to be comfortable when they go to the vet. You know, people looking in their ears and their teeth and picking up their paws and, you know, looking in there. So they work on that from the time they're little puppies. We use entirely positive reinforcement training. So we use a reward system. We reward them for, you know, good behaviors. We ignore or redirect behaviors that we don't want. We don't use corrective equipment. We don't use choke change. We don't chains. We don't use shock collars. We don't use any kind of physical collar corrections. We don't raise our voices at the dogs. We want all of it to be a positive learning experience for these guys. We want them to be eager to work with people, and no matter who's holding the leash, because obviously it's not going to be their original trainer who's going to be with them the rest of their lives. We're not training them to be someone's pet. We want a dog that will willingly work for whoever's holding that leash when the time comes to transfer all of their skills to a client. So that's the sort of the basis of our program. Now, one thing that we've been doing for probably a dozen years, that's a lot of fun, a lot of work for the inmate handlers, but a lot of fun too, and also a very good learning experience for them, is we do have our own breeding program. And so when one of our dogs has a litter of puppies, we take the mother dog and the puppies to the prison when they're about 4 weeks old, and they work with them to bring that litter along. We call it early litter care. They have a training room in their dorm on the first floor that's dedicated to our program. So we set up the nursery then there with lots of enrichment things for the puppies, lots of different exposures for them to surfaces for them to walk on, we go to the, Once Upon a Child secondhand store and get little plastic Fisher-Price toys and things for them to climb on and tunnel under, and just lots of, we want enrichment for these puppies. We want them to have all kinds of new experiences. They work on handling the puppies very gently and carefully and in a positive way when they're very young. They learn to love their kennels. They feed them in little kennels when they're young. They let them sleep in them. They don't have to. They don't enclose them in them at that age. But they also have the comfort of having their mother and their litter mates there with them. And then we get them out, at about 6 weeks. We get them out in other places in the institution. If the weather's nice, we'll get them out, let them pen out in the yard for them to play in. They'll start taking them other places in the institution just to see sights and sounds, like the recreation center. They might, at a distance, watch a volleyball game, or just lots of experiences. The socializing is absolutely crucial and key to raising a good service dog. We want dogs that were exposed to many sights and sounds when they were young, so that they incorporate that into their foundation of experience and knowledge. I've had pet dogs who weren't well socialized, and you find, and maybe some of you have too, and you find that they startle easily. They hear a new sound that they've never heard before, or they jump, or they bark. And we still have that sometimes. I'm not saying we can eliminate that, but the more exposures we can get them, the better. And we have a lot of sound effects CDs that we play for the puppies when they're young, everything from car horns and barking dogs and growling and children laughing and screeching and playing in a playground, so that they hear all those sounds when they're very, very young. And then when like I said, when they're about 8 or 9 weeks, we sort of start them into the formal training process. And we network with a lot of other nonprofit service dog organizations. We are accredited by Assistance Dogs International, which is the international umbrella organization for nonprofit assistance dogs. They set standards. We go through a very rigorous accreditation process every 5 years. And so we network with other member organizations in our breeding and in training. And so we don't always keep every puppy from all of our litters, and we'll share litters with other organizations. Hi, Boo. Did you meet everybody? Okay. All right. So at about, well, it depends on the dog. But yes, a lot of people often ask, what age do we place the dogs? And it really varies. Like, O.C. did have a litter of puppies, so that put her a little older than many. O.C.'s being good, and you're trying to make her break her down stick. But we've got a few right now who are less than 2 years old, under 2 years old, that have already been matched in our own placement process. So dogs mature at different rates, just like kids. So we just have to monitor the dogs and see how they're doing, look at their skills, look at our client list and our client's needs, and figure out, when a dog might be ready to start the placement process. And you've made a friend.
So talk a little bit about how the placement process works.
Okay.
Like, it's not number one dog.
Right.
Yeah.
So we start looking at when the dogs are, as I say, about 18 months to 20 months old, and we look at our client list and we look at our dogs and we assess their skills. And it's not, our placement is not first come, first served with clients or oldest dogs out, have to go first. That's not how we work. We want the best possible match from given all the circumstances and all the factors that go into that. And that includes not just the dog's skills, but their personalities. We have some dogs that are like this one, as you can tell. She's not a couch potato dog. She wants to go, and do. And we could not put her with somebody who has a very sedate and quiet, stay-at-home lifestyle. We have other dogs who would love that lifestyle. I've got one at home right now who's, I'm sure, on the couch as we speak. And she's a golden retriever. Ubu is a lab, and we do see some breed differences. It's a little bit of an overgeneralization. The labs tend to be like this, worker bees. If I drop my keys 20 times, she'll happily pick them up 20 times. My golden retrievers, they'll get it the first time. They'll grudgingly get it the second time. The third time, it's like, really? Get it yourself. But the Goldens tend to be great in, say, the facility dog healthcare settings, because they are definitely pet me till your arm falls off dogs. The Goldens are like, oh, who wants to pet me next? Whereas Ubu, she's friendly, she likes people, but she would not be happy in a job where she had to go around and just sit for strangers to pet her all day. She's like, no, what can I do now? What kind of, activity can I get into? The Goldens, we have a lot of pictures of our Goldens in hospital beds. They're just sacking out with this person. Now I'll go down the hall and sleep with this person. Again, it's an overgeneralization. And we train Goldens, Labs, and then Lab Golden Crosses. And we do sometimes see sort of the best of both worlds in the crosses. They tend to have a little bit more of a task-oriented demeanor, and yet, they've got the Golden sort of loving everybody sort of approach to life. So, now you're gonna make a liar out of me. I'm just gonna make everybody in this room pet her. But as Sheila pointed out, we definitely work very hard to make a match that is gonna be a lifelong partnership. We're not just, oh, we've gotta get this dog off our plate, so we're gonna match it come what may. That's not how it works. And sometimes the match just takes right away and we know, oh, this is meant to be. And other times we'll try out 2 or 3 different dogs with somebody, kind of see how it goes. There's a lot of intangible that goes to it. Obviously having the dog respond to them and respond and perform cues and things is important. But there's a bonding that is absolutely essential to the service dog partnership. And we have to see that there will be a future bond between handler and dog. And it doesn't happen right away. Sometimes you can see it's gonna happen right away, but that is absolutely essential. And we go through the training process. It's very individualized. We do some group classes. We do definitely a group classroom class where we go through a big, thick manual of all of our, just everything about a service dog, about learning theory of dogs, health, medical things, grooming, everything that someone who might have a service dog needs to know. But then we start the hands-on training. And we do some group classes, and we do a lot of our placement classes at the prison. And we had to suspend all of that during COVID, as you might imagine. And we've really just, in the past year, gotten that back together. And we've got a class of 5 clients right now that we've been getting out to the prison for the last few months on a regular basis. And we have our inmate handlers lead the classes. They know the dogs better than we do at this point. We've got some inmates who've been in our program upwards of 10 years. And they really are really good at this. And they know what motivates their dogs. They are the ones who taught the dogs the cues. They've been troubleshooting through this process. So they lead these classes and they show the clients, and it really helps them, because they'll be doing the fine tuning of the skills that the dogs will need for the individual client. And so for the inmates to be able to meet the clients and see them and actually see their gait, if they walk, or how they handle a wheelchair, what kind of wheelchair they use, their range of motion. I could describe it to them, but if they can see it and work with the clients and know exactly what it is the clients need these dogs to do, then it's so much easier for them to work on those skills, knowing exactly what it is that the client has to have the dog able to do for it. And then we of course move it out into the public arena. We of course get the dogs to the clients' homes and let them get acclimated there. We do that gradually. We'll take them over for a few hours, maybe the first time, and just let them sniff around the house, meet the rest of the family members. If there are any other pets in the home, we do have a rule that there can only be one other dog in the home. If there are more than one dog, we have found the hard way that it really dilutes the bonding. Dogs love other dogs. Most dogs, our dogs tend to love other dogs. And we don't want the dogs to become sort of part of the dog family and the bonding with their dog siblings. We want the dog to bond with the handler that they're going to be working with, that they're partnered with. Same is true with too much interaction with family members. We are very strict about that. We have to, And we have to remind gently and sometimes firmly other family members, especially if they're kids, that the person who is gonna be partnered with the dog and that the dog is going to be helping has to be the primary person for this dog, has to be the one that the dog bonds with. Only that person can feed the dog. Every now and then we'll have a situation where the person who is getting the dog may need some help, just physically, from a family member, and then we have to be very orchestrated about how limited that is. You know, if someone else has to help sometimes with the feeding, it has to be very unemotional, it has to be very, you know, no petting, it really, it sounds sort of nitpicky, but it's so crucial that other family members, that the dog doesn't become sort of the family pet. And we keep that pretty strict for at least 6 months. Nobody else is feeding, petting, loving on, sleeping with the dog. Over time, once the bond is truly strong between the partners, between the handler and the dog, then, you know, we can relax it a little bit, but we really never want some of those core things to change. We want the handler, as long as they're able to always feed the dog, you know, be the one that spends the most time with the dog, because the bonding is just absolutely essential. What am I forgetting? Questions, anytime you have
I was
questions.
gonna say, are there times where somebody gets a dog, but then it's not a good match, and then they get another dog, and you know, you have to try it out?
We've had, we've really, I can only remember one that we got fairly far into the placement process and realized it just wasn't gonna work. And so we had to unravel that, or it wasn't finalized yet. So, but yeah, we did have to sort of just back it out, and kept, you know, thinking that it's just taking a little longer than others, but in the end, it just didn't click.
Well, and I think you need to say the dogs were still our dogs.
Yeah, and we retain ownership of the dogs even after placement. So, you know, we have a contract with our clients that spells out all the responsibilities, and the clients are responsible for the dog's care, you know, their feeding and their veterinary care and so on. But we do retain ownership of the dogs, and we do retain an insurance policy on the dogs.
And we check on the dogs, like, so often we examine it, we evaluate it.
They do, in the first year after placement, we do follow-ups every 30 days, up to 6 months, and then I think it's then at the 1 year mark, and then after that, assuming all is going well, we do a new public access test once a year. If there are any issues, and sometimes a client may have a change in circumstances in the home, or in their physical limitations, something might change, and we have to go back and do some refresher training or add some new skills that the dog didn't need initially. Or, you know, and sometimes dogs, you know, dogs are dogs. We've had a dog who's sort of, not, I won't say suddenly, but unexpectedly and over time, developed an aversion to getting in the car. And so we have to work through that. And we are, you know, that's one of the advantages of being a local organization. And we do place dogs really within a 35-mile radius of greater Louisville, so, you know, into southern Indiana, surrounding counties. But we are here for the lifetime of the partnership. And if they have an issue, if our clients have a problem, or if they need, you know, something, they need some refresher training, the dog needs refresher training, they have a change in circumstances, we're there for them.
Can you give some examples of what the dog might be helpful for a person like myself who has mobility issues? What is the benefit of having a dog?
Okay, sure. And what we do when we first, when someone first applies or inquires, we sit down with them in a personal interview, and we talk to them about their daily life. What do you do? Where do you go? You know, and ask them how they envision a dog might be able to assist them. But as I mentioned earlier, one of the main things our many of our clients need is just, they drop things, and it's very difficult to pick them up. If you have balance issues, if you're in a wheelchair, you know, it's hard to pick something up. Now, it would just, that's a good demo, honey, but I was gonna have you show something even more important.
And see, she didn't ask to do that.
Yeah, so if I drop something, I don't want my dog, I don't want my dog to dive for it unless I ask her to, because it might be something sharp, it might be something dangerous, you know, so I don't want them to just pick up any old thing that gets dropped. If we get it, hold, and then I want her to hold it, I don't want her to just throw it at me, give. I don't want her to let go of it until I say give, and it's in my hand. So those are, you know, things that we have to pay a lot of attention to. It's not just kind of fetch and bring the ball back and drop it at my feet. It's very, so retrieving is a big one. And I don't know if she will do this, but.
Can she help me out on my lazy boy?
You know, we do have I don't think she'll do this, but, so we've had, we had a client once who had difficulty, like, just raising himself up from bed. And so we had a shorter, it's really a toy. It's a tug toy that has like a handle, and it has a handle at the other end. And we taught the dog, you know, to catch it by his bed. And we taught the dog to she'd hop up on the bed, sit at his feet, and I think the cue was raise me up.
Yes.
Raise me up. And she would grab her end of it and pull him up, you know, into a sitting position. I mean, once he could do that, he could swing his legs around and get up. He just couldn't get, you know, he would otherwise have had to sort of slide off the bed, and because he just didn't have the core, the spinal core to sit up on his own. So things like that, and we do customize cues like that. Not everybody needs that. That's not something we teach every dog, because not very many will need it. But when it's needed, it's needed.
Listen, you don't have to pull me up anymore.
Can she cook?
I can't even cook.
We also come in and evaluate your house.
Yeah.
Because you may have wires down that we don't know about, or open garbage cans. So we evaluate, it's like my daughter adopted children. So they go through the adoption process, they have to clear your house, make sure it's safe for your house. So we do that for the dog. We do that for trainers, and we do it for clients. Evaluate, make sure it's a good setting.
How long does it take to train the client? Obviously,
Yeah.
training the dog,
Yeah,
I
right.
understand that, but the client's got to know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Especially if we're not dog people.
Yeah, and most of them aren't. I mean, you know, they might have had pet dogs, but it's a very different type of training. It varies, again, it's just like training the dog, the length of time for each dog, but I would say, and we're a very small organization, I should mention that. We have like 3 full-time employees and a lot of volunteers. So the class that we're training right now, that we're placing with right now, they did their, what we call the bookwork class, the classroom part. They did that back in January, but we didn't get the actual hands-on started until beginning of April?
Yeah.
Beginning of April. And so, you know, some of our clients tire more easily than others, more quickly, so they can't do as long a session as another client. But I would say, we started in early April. We're gonna finish most of these, I would say, by July. You know, and some will take a little longer than others. We've got a couple that are almost in the final stages, that have been going on, and the dogs are living with them now, but it's not finalized. So it's longer than just 4 months, because, you know, we really want it to be right before we sign off on all the paperwork. But for example, the 2 that are close to being finished, they've been working together since before the new year.
Yeah.
But the dogs have been living with them for at least 2 months now. So it really does vary, but it's a months-long process.
Are children harder to train than adults?
It depends, again. I was a lawyer before I retired, so
Yeah.
everything depends, right? But 3 of our clients right now are teenagers. I think they were 17, one may have already turned 18, and one's about to. And They move pretty quickly, and they are moving. One of them is one of the ones who's almost finished, and the other two are in the placement process, and they're moving pretty quickly. Our cutoff age is 8 years old. We don't place with children younger than 8.
But we can, like, we had a client who had a child who was on the spectrum, and mom would come to classes with the child, and mom would go into prison when she got clearance. And that dog loves that child. I mean, the child was a runner, and would just go out the door.
A bolt, he would bolt.
And we worked with the dog and the child to say, don't, when you go, you gotta take the dog with you. The dog also, the child ended up having seizures. The dog went to the mother and made the mom aware, and he rode on the gurney with the kid to the hospital and stayed with him the whole time. So, but that's an 8-year-old kid. We would never give responsibility about himself.
Right.
So mom is basically the sign-off person.
I was just wondering if the kids would wanna play with them more than do the training.
Some children, some of our clients, it's a reward when they come home. If they have a good day or they have some issues going on in school. If they come home and, get a good report or whatever, that's called a companion dog. So.
Yeah, we have some dogs that I think, there are various terms for it, but home companion. And so the dog doesn't have public access rights. So in other words, they can't take the dog with them to a restaurant but the dog is there to provide some type of support for the child's disability. Whether it's, emotional, we don't really place psychological or emotional service dogs, but the dog can provide a service to a child or to an adult for that matter, in the home. And we've had a few of those. But but to your point about would the child want to play with the dog, probably, and that's that's part of, if you're a child getting a dog, whether it's a home companion or a service dog, that's part of the bonding process too. But it has to be appropriate play.
Yes.
So exactly. So we can't have the child letting the dog run amok or chew things up or things like that. And play is another kind of thing that is a little different with the service dog in training than it is with a pet dog. Playing tug, for example. We generally don't play tug with our dogs. And part of the reason for that is, tug, if you ever played tug, it's like how you pull your arm out of your socket kind of tug. We want, if we need tug, and we often do, to pull open a door or a drawer or a refrigerator, we'll put a pull rope on it. We want it to be a certain type of movement, sustained, strong, but not wildly jerking tug. And so we don't want the dog to see a rope and think, Now, we do let them play tug with each other because in dog world, for whatever reason, that doesn't make them crazy tuggers with people, with any rope they see. My dogs tug on sticks and toys and everything else with each other, but they can still learn a nice sustained strong tug to break the seal on a refrigerator or something like that.
And on that note, people always say, do your dogs ever get to be normal? When they're not dressed, they're dogs. They're regular dogs, can do whatever. If you try to make sure the manners in the house are retained, but they become real dogs. I mean, they're real dogs now, but they become fun dogs.
Yeah.
Funner, more fun. Learn on an education.
So it's the dress.
How many tears are shed by the inmates when the dogs leave, and how do you keep the emotion out of that?
And the volunteers, when the volunteers have to turn them around.
It is hard. It is emotionally hard for them. I think it's tempered by the pride. Getting to meet the clients is huge for that because they get to see, it's not just, the dog goes off and never comes back one day because it's being trained out here. It's being trained there with the client. And so they are so proud, and when they see the dog start to bond with that client, and they see, we have a client who's one of our clients in a wheelchair, and she has it's a manual wheelchair. It's not a power wheelchair, and she powers it, these are her words, she did like Fred Flintstone style, she moves it with her feet. And she has very limited, range of motion in her arms are, she can't really extend her arm like this, it's pretty close to her body. And she has very limited dexterity in her fingers. So it's very hard for her to even give a treat. And this is her second service dog from us. She had a service dog, they had a wonderful partnership. And that dog just died last fall at age 12 or 13, I think. And this is her, so this is a successor dog that she's getting, this one right here, OC. And so we were working with her at the prison, and one of the inmates was her team leader that day. And they were working on things, and I think they were working on trying to hook the vest, which is hard. I mean, it's hard for me sometimes, the vest and the harnesses can be a little complicated, and so they were she was working on her, what was the best and easiest way for her to do it. And she was struggling with it, and the inmate kind of looked up with like watery eyes and said, the things we take for granted. And it's so true. And so I think, yes, they're sad and they're gonna miss these dogs, but we won't let them be alone for long. We have a lot of dogs. So here's a new puppy for you, start all over again. So they, it's hard, it's hard.
It's a win-win program.
Definitely.
Yes.
And I was wondering, because I've always been told or taught, you don't pet service dogs, but obviously, I guess you can in certain circumstances, correct?
Well, so obviously, if you see a service dog out there, you recognize it as such, with a double pet knee or a vest or something, it's always default to don't interact in any way. Not only don't pet, but don't go up and go, oh, you're so pretty. And we do that in our training all the time, because that's what we get out in public. So part of our distraction training is, our inmates or our volunteers are working with a dog, and I'm the obnoxious, public person, and I come up and go, oh my goodness, aren't you adorable? And we want the dog to go to, look up at the handler like there's another one. And so yes, the rule is definitely not only don't pet them, don't talk to them, people, you'd be amazed if people, even if it says do not pet service dog, people are gonna go find it.
Kids are the worst. Kids just run up and start petting.
But now Ubu is not a service dog. She is a release dog, and in fact, her little vest is therapy dog, so it's kind of her job is to interact and be petted and things like that. We do, having said everything I just said, we do also train them that people are going to pet them, and so we want them to react the right way when someone does. So, what we want them to do is ignore it. So if I were to go up and pet Osie, she's like, yeah, somebody's petting me, but I'm just gonna stay here. And if she were standing next to Sheila in a heel position, I would want her to do the same thing. I would want her to go. and the way we train that is, you can see by the way Ubu stares at me, and now she's gonna stare even harder, is when they are little, I would have each of you come up to pet her while I did this.
Yeah.
And so somebody approaching her to pet, who's not me holding the leash, is basically an environmental cue for her to look at me and get a cookie. Oh, here comes another one, Ubu, cookie time. Oh, here comes another one, cookie time. So that's how we get them to go, oh, somebody's petting me, I don't care because I'm gonna get a cookie.
Yeah.
So, and Ubu learned that lesson very well, didn't she?
Yeah.
But as I said, just very basic positioning things, getting them to move their bodies. Ubu, back. Back.
Question.
Now she's gonna throw all her cute, that's a ta-da. Ubu, back. I didn't say sneeze, back. Okay, good girl. Ubu, heel. Oh, yeah. Ubu, front. That's front. Front is right here. Ubu, side. She's not performing very well. That's spin. Ubu, side. Ubu, front. That's better.
How old is she?
She's 6.5 actually. Stand. Oh, over spin. Spin. Ta-da! Okay, there. That, we do a lot of that these days because I take her to some kids, so she's like, come on, let me do my kid tricks. Other questions?
So there's a difference between a therapy dog and a service dog?
There is. Yes, so, and I'm not sure, I guess ADI, which is our accrediting organization, Assistance Dogs International, does have definitions that we follow. So, under the umbrella of service dog, there are several types of service dogs, or I think they actually use the word assistance dog as opposed to service dog. But, so a guide dog is a type of service dog or assistance dog, someone who helps the blind. We don't train that. That is a very different specialized, but it is a service dog. There are hearing dogs, dogs who will alert someone who is hearing impaired to certain sounds. The phone ringing, the smoke detector going off, a building alarm going off. And we don't do that either. That's a different type of training. There are dogs that are trained to alert to certain medical conditions, seizures, low blood sugar for diabetics, and so they alert, and the dogs alert in different ways. Usually it's a nudge, it might be something else depending on what the client, how the client wants it to be alerted. That's a type of service dog. And then mobility dogs, which is what we primarily train, is another type of assistance dog or service dog. And they are taught tasks to ameliorate a mobility disability, like picking things up, raising someone up. You know, some dogs, and a dog has to be big enough, but you can't learn this. Okay. So we have a cue called cross. So she would be, and for again, it has to be very. This is not something we would train for every dog or every client, but for a dog that's large enough and a client that is appropriate size, we can teach the dog to assume a brace position. And you can't put full pressure on the dog, but it's sort of one of those things where, like, you know, I sometimes need just 2 fingers on a surface to just help, you know, get up. So to very gently help them sort of balance. It's not to put their weight on the dog, but it's just the dog has to hold very still, and they can balance as they stand up and just get their bearings. So the tasks that are trained for different types of service dogs, as you can see, are very different. You know, dogs that alert for a hearing impaired person have to learn something very different than our dogs learn. And then the concept of a facility dog is really relatively new. Facility dogs, especially in healthcare, have really taken off in the last 10 years. We placed our first dog with Norton Hospital. Well, Henry was the first one. So we placed one some years ago with a hospital chaplain, and he was sort of wanted to incorporate a dog into his ministry at the hospital. But then about 3 years after that, Norton developed a formal facility dog program. It's called Heal Dog Heal, which is H-E-E-L dog, H-E-A-L, Heal Dog Heal. And we placed our first dog with them in that program in 2018.
Yeah.
2018, 2019.
Before COVID.
Yeah, it would have been, yeah, Juno. And that program has just exploded. And we now have a total of, I think, 12 dogs in the Norton system. And they work about, maybe half of them are with child life specialists, because using dogs in pediatric care has really taken off. And those dogs really get more involved in the actual therapies that are provided to the kids. They help motivate children. The dogs learn to, role play. Like, the child doesn't want to put a gown on, and I'd say, well, okay, if Ubu's going to put her gown on, and then you have to put your gown on. The child can help Ubu put her gown on, and then they'll put their gown on. They've trained the dogs they'll take like a little bottle of, like an empty cough syrup bottle, plastic cup, and they'll teach the dog, take your medicine, and the Juno, one of the dogs who works with the child life specialist, she takes the bottle and she throws her head up, like she's drinking it, and holds it there for a second. And then, good dog, Juno, and then the child has to take theirs. And then they'll have a little, like an oral syringe, and they give Juno a pretend shot, and then the child has to take the shot. And sometimes just getting to interact with the dog is their reward for doing the therapies in the first place. It motivates them to do some of the therapies. There was a little boy in the ER, and he had a respiratory condition, and they have a little, what is it, a spirometer, it's a little thing that he needed to blow in, and the ball comes up and they can see how strong his lung capacity is. And he didn't want to do it. And so they have other things they try. They got a little pinwheel thing, and said, would you blow the pinwheel to kind of get him going? And he was, no. So in comes Duncan, the facility dog, works with in the pediatric ER, with a pinwheel, and the stick's in his mouth, and he comes dancing in, and the little boy's like, his eyes light up, and so they, will you blow Duncan's pinwheel? Well, yeah, he was all about blowing Duncan's pinwheel. So it's just little things like that. There was a little boy at Women and Children's he had a leg injury, and it had been very painful, and I think he'd had surgery, and trying to get him to walk as part of his therapy was just a daily struggle. And he was ready to be discharged, but one of the requirements for discharge was he had to walk on his own. And he wouldn't get out of bed, he refused to do it. And one of the nurses remembered that they brought, I think it was Zeke in a few days, like right after he got out of surgery, to visit, and he had been enthralled with Zeke. And so they called for Zeke, and they brought Zeke in, and they had Zeke stand in the doorway, and the little boy's eyes lit up, and they said, do you want to come see Zeke? Well, yeah. So he hopped out of bed and walked over to see Zeke and hugged him, and then he got to go home. So it's just, the uses the things they can use the facility dogs for, especially with kids, is limited only by their imagination.
We have one in Children's Cancer Unit downtown who, those play pianos that the kids with their feet can do that with his paws. She also can paint. So they teach her to hold a paintbrush, dip it here, dip it in, and then it was one of my dogs, and I've got a little picture that the dog was painted in. A lot of the patients go home with some of those pictures. So it's working toward the individual needs.
I mean, for the adults, it's probably a little bit more of a therapy dog thing. They just bring the dogs in to cheer up. Although, certainly some of them will use the dog to encourage people to walk. We had a dog placed with a physical therapist at University of Louisville. The therapist and the dog just retired a month ago, but they were there for several years, and that dog was highly involved in the therapies that she did with her patients. And just even reaching out, like the patient would throw, something, and the dog would get it, and the patient, and they had a line where the dog knew to stop, and the patient had to stretch and reach to take the item from the dog, and that's therapy. But it's a lot more fun when you're doing it with the dog than when you're just, following orders. So she had just all kinds of innovative things that she used Travis for. But so I got off on a tangent. I could talk about this stuff all day, but you were asking about the difference between service dog, therapy dog. So typically a therapy dog, we think of as a dog who just goes who goes with their owner. Like a lot of pet dogs are therapy dogs, and the owners will take them to nursing homes, hospitals, rehab centers, and just visit people and cheer them up. There's a wonderful organization in town called WAGS. I think it stands for Wonderful Animals Given Support. They are a therapy dog organization, and their members, they're all volunteers. They have their own pet dogs, and they have a screening process. The dogs have to be temperament tested and make sure they can interact safely in public settings. But yeah, they just take their pet dogs, and they're all kinds of dogs. They're poodles, and they're little fuzzy dogs, and they're great big dogs, and they're
great big Burmese.
Yeah, Bernese mountain dogs, and they take them. I think Baptist hospitals uses WAGs to come and do their dog
Do
visits.
you use only certain breeds of dogs?
We use Labrador retrievers, golden retrievers, and then lab golden crosses. Yeah, that's all we use, and, I mean, a lot of dogs could do the work. We have found that labs and goldens work well for us, certainly for our mobility clients, because they're natural retrievers, so picking up things is natural to them. It's an instinctive thing, it's very easy to teach them to do that. They're people friendly, they tend to be, very anxious to interact with people, they're not standoffish. And they're public friendly. I mean, I'm used to most dogs, but, some people see a German Shepherd out in public and they're like, ooh, guard dog. But labs and goldens, people are like,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, because you always see goldens or labs, and I would think it because of temperament and then also the hair, but I was always wondering because, my last dog was, a collie, the most intelligent dog I've ever seen in my life.
yeah.
I was wondering if they ever do anything like that, or if is it too hairy or too much energy, because collies do have a lot of energy, but
Yeah,
intelligence-wise, it seems like they'd be.
Again, I think a collie could certainly do the work. It is a grooming, grooming issue. I mean, the goldens are a grooming challenge.
Yeah.
A lot of organizations use, golden doodles, or poodles. We've done a few doodles. We never tried to really systematically do, poodles or golden doodles that were bred for service dog work. We way back in the day, before we had a systematic breeding program, we had a few doodles that were either donated, I think they were all donated as puppies. And they didn't pan out, and that's not to say that it's because of the breed at all. It's just they were, I'm
They're
trying
a
to
bit
remember.
hyperactive.
Pardon?
They're a bit hyperactive.
They were very,
I've got one, I can tell you.
yeah, and they were vocal. They wanted to bark a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the problem I have.
I mean, some of our labs do too. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of people love it, and a lot of organizations, find that they're greatly in demand because they don't shed as much. Now, they do shed, but they don't shed like these guys, I have to admit that.
Especially seasonal. You can tell when the winter coat's coming off.
Yeah, ugh,
Yeah.
yeah. Very pleased. Right.
She was a great helper when I passed out brochures.
Oh, good.
She said, "Where's
Good
my
dog,
cookie?"
Ruby. And then, I don't know if she'll do this, cause we haven't done this in a long time, but we also teach them things like, Ruby, lap. No, lap. Here we go. So this is just, well, she doesn't want us to maintain it, but we do teach them to maintain that position, and that's, like for our wheelchair clients, that's about the only way they can put the vest on. Or if they wanna look in their ears, or, things like that.
I'll see if she'll laugh. Oh, I know, we're best friends now. Oh, see, now.
Ruby.
Lap. Lap. This is the front. Lap. Lap. There you go. So I could put her client that she's going to doesn't have this kind of mobility, so we try to get her to cross and then turn and then put the vest on that way. That's what we're working on.
How old is she?
OC we just discussed this, we think three-ish.
2 and 3.
Between 2 and 3. We think she turned 3 in January. But again, she was a little delayed because she had puppies. She was a breeder. Lots of puppies. And I have one of her puppies also that I trained. And there's a big difference between a puppy and a full-grown dog. Full-grown, too old for a puppy anymore, but it's been interesting. And it's very interesting because mother and daughter, they play together, but I don't think they realize it's mother and daughter. They did initially, but it's like, oh, so they're both in the same house and they're both, but, yeah. I'm like, yes.
Have her see, they'll give you a leash.
OC, leash. Good girl, front, good girl.
And as you saw, if you could see, she brought it way up on her lap because, again, for our clients, we want to make sure whatever it is they're bringing, if it's the leash, if it's the keys, or if it's the phone, that they're getting it right up close to the person and, or putting it in their hand. And we, you know, we can customize the delivery. For most things, we want the dog to put it in an open hand or an outstretched hand. But for some of our clients, they might prefer a lap delivery and just put it in the lap so that they can then pick it up in the way that's easiest for them. But, you know, what's not helpful is to just bring it and kind of put it right here and it falls on the ground, throw it on the ground. Or let go before they've got a good grip on it and it slides out of their hand. So the delivery is very, very important. Super, you're disrupting the training process.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do the genders make much difference, or is one gender better at a certain kind of work than others?
I have not seen that. Now, having said that, I've worked personally as a weekend volunteer, you know, with almost exclusively girls, not entirely, but I have worked on placements with both. I've only raised one boy from a puppy. But I've worked on placements with both, and I really have not seen a difference. You know, we have some of our clients and some of our inmate trainers, you know, have a preference. I have a preference for girls. I don't know why. I think it's because my favorite dog growing up was a girl, and I just got hooked, you know. But some of our inmate handlers don't want to deal with the heat cycle. You know, dogs go through a heat cycle every 6 months, and they have to wear diapers and, you know, kept clean. That doesn't bother me. But some of them would just rather not fool with it. I have this image in my head that the male dogs want to lift their leg on everything and mark everything. That's some male dogs maybe do. Ours generally don't, because they almost always go from puppyhood to the bathroom on leash. And we take them in the middle of the yard. We don't take them up to a fire hydrant. So we have male dogs who to this day don't even lift their leg. They just squat. You know, people just have perceptions. But as far as trainability and placeability, I have not seen any difference. I think our breakdown of the facility dogs at Norton is about 50-50. And we've got 2 dogs at Peace Hospital. They both work with art therapists, so they work with children and adults who are getting mental health therapy there. And they're both male. Yeah, Quinn and Aiden.
I don't even remember the names of all the dogs.
It's like children's.
The hard thing to remember is who's related to who. Like I have one that's, I said to Sue, so Salem is who? Oh, it's Ubu's granddaughter.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I have a lot of grandchildren, grand doggies out there.
Well, thank you guys.
Look through the brochure. If there's anything we can help you with, give us a call. And thank you all. And thanks, Sue, for talking.